Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteus and you are watching The World Report. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines. US and Russian officials are set to meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days, with Donald Trump confirming his participation. Ukraine says it has not been invited, and a Trump envoy states Europe will not have a seat at the talks. Israel and Hamas conduct a major prisoner swap, with 3 Israeli hostages released in exchange for 369 Palestinian prisoners. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrives in Israel, focusing on Trump's plan to move Palestinians out of Gaza. Lebanon reports 2 deaths in an Israeli strike as regional hostilities escalate. Meanwhile, 25 people are arrested after an attack on UN peacekeepers. At least 18 people are dead and many injured after a deadly stampede in a New Delhi train station. Victims of the tragedy were attempting to board trains to attend Indian mega festival Mahakumbh. Major diplomatic moves are underway as US officials are set to meet delegates from Russia in Saudi Arabia. The agenda for this meeting is set to discuss the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. But with Ukraine left out of the talk and Europe not given a seat at the table, a question surfaces about the direction of these negotiations. Here is a full update.
US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is planning to meet Russian officials in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. They are going to initiate the final discussion to end the war. This follows a phone call between Trump and Putin on Wednesday, when the US shocked its European allies by reviving direct contact with Moscow after a freeze of more than 3 years. On the other hand, Zelensky has also stated that he openly denied Trump's request for Ukraine's earth minerals in exchange for their aid to Ukraine.
Я не дав міністрам підписувати відповідну угоду, тому що вона не готова. На мою думку, вона не захищає, вона ще не готова, щоб захистити нас, наші інтереси. Для мене дуже важливо говорити про інвестиції в Україну, саме інвестиції, і це повинно бути виписано юридично правильно, коректно, і це інвестиції.
Zelensky further commented that the fact that Ukraine hasn't been invited is a cause for concern.
First, that maybe there is something at the table, but not on our table. So I didn't see any invitations, envoys, and etc. from Ukraine to meet with some other envoys. But anyway, envoy, this is that national. I mean, this it's security advisor, and so we don't have any papers, any invitations, and it's something strange for me to speak in this case, in this format. If before we don't have any negotiation between us and our strategic partners.
European officials are in a state of shock as this meeting will not be hosting any European delegates. Vance repeated the Trump administration's line that Europe must step up in a big way to provide for its own defense. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Let's now take a look at some news updates from across North America. Trump's foreign policy has left the world confused with mixed messages on international relations. His America First agenda caused tensions with allies while straining relations with longtime partners. Decisions such as withdrawing from multilateral agreements and questioning long-standing alliances created uncertainty on the global stage. Despite pledges to prioritize US interests, his approach sometimes undermined diplomacy and created conflicting signals on key issues, leaving other countries guessing about America's stance. A Tesla dealership was targeted by a protest organized by anti-Elon Musk activists. The demonstrators voiced opposition to Musk's policies and business practices, including his management of Tesla and other companies. Protesters gathered outside the dealership, expressing frustration with his public statements and corporate decisions. The protests intensified debates about Musk's impact on the industry and the role of corporate leadership in shaping societal issues. Small businesses are facing challenges under the Trump administration, struggling with increased tariffs, trade policies, and economic uncertainty. Many business owners express concerns over rising costs and supply chain disruptions caused by trade wars, particularly with China. While some industries benefit from tax cuts, others report declining profits and difficulty in maintaining growth. The pandemic has further exacerbated these issues, with many small businesses struggling to stay afloat amidst the economic impact. New York police have charged 5 people in connection with the murder of a transgender man, describing the crime as disturbing. Authorities revealed that the victim was targeted and suffered brutal violence before his death. Investigators believe the attack may have been motivated by hate, although the exact circumstances remain under review. The suspects face multiple charges, including murder and hate crimes. Officials have condemned the killing, calling for justice and greater protections for the LGBTQ+ community. A Missouri man and a D-lister pleaded guilty to attempted murder and assault in the shooting of 16-year-old Ralph Carl. The incident occurred in April 2023 when Jarl, who is black, rang Lester's doorbell by mistake, trying to pick up his younger brother. Lester, a 84-year-old white man, shot Jarl in the head and chest, leaving him seriously injured. Jarl survived and later identified Lester as the shooter. The case has sparked outrage, with many calling it a racially motivated attack. Lester will face sentencing later this year, with the possibility of a lengthy prison term. Hamas has released 3 more Israeli hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. The swap follows days of uncertainty over the ceasefire deal, which Israel and Hamas have accused each other of violating. Here is a full report.
Hamas has released another 3 Israeli hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners following a week in which the fragile ceasefire deal appeared under threat. American-Israeli Segui Dekel Chen, 36, Argentinian-Israeli Yair Horn, 46, and Russian-Israeli Alexander Trufanov, 29, were freed in return for 369 Palestinians held in Israeli jails. So far, 19 hostages and more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners have been freed in the first phase of ceasefire deal, which began on 19 January. The swap came days after Hamas said it would pause the release of hostages, accusing Israel of violating the terms of the deal, an allegation denied by Israel. Israel, backed by US President Donald Trump, said intense fighting would resume unless the hostages were handed over. Hamas later said it remained committed to the ceasefire, and that Israel was responsible for any complications or delays. But on Saturday, the 6th swap went ahead, with the hostages handed over to Red Cross workers in a highly choreographed public show in Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip. Surrounded by heavily armed Hamas militants, the men briefly addressed a crowd of Palestinians before being transferred into Red Cross vehicles. They did not look as gaunt as the hostages freed a week earlier. Their appearance had aroused anger in Israel and elsewhere. Under the first 6-week stage of the ceasefire deal, 33 hostages and 1,900 prisoners are supposed to be freed. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Israel late on Saturday on his first trip to the Middle East, after a widely condemned proposal by President Donald Trump to displace Palestinians in Gaza. Trump first floated the suggestion that Egypt and Jordan should take in Palestinians from Gaza on January 25th, a proposal they strongly opposed. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from South America. Heavy rains in Bolivia have claimed 28 lives, affecting 8 of the country's 9 administrative divisions. Vice Civil Defense Minister Juan Carlos Calvi-Montes said 83 municipalities are impacted, with 27 in a state of emergency. La Paz has been the hardest hit and 4 people remain missing. The National Meteorological and Hydrological Service predict the rains will persist through March and April. Brazilian President Lula da Silva's approval rating has fallen to 24% from 35% in December, according to a Datafolha poll. His disapproval rate rose to 41%, marking the worst figures of his 3 terms. Despite past popularity, Lula's approval has not exceeded 40% since his return to office in 2023. An Argentine court has issued arrest warrants for Myanmar's junta leader Min Aung, ex-president Hin Kuo and Aung San Suu Kyi over alleged genocide and crimes against humanity against the Rohingya minority. The ruling was made under universal jurisdiction, allowing prosecution for severe crimes worldwide. Myanmar's junta dismissed the move, while Rohingya advocates hailed it as a historic step towards justice. The case now awaits Interpol notification. Ecuadorian Colonel Porfirio Sendino, head of Air Force and anti-drug unit, was gunned down in Guayaquil while en route to a military ceremony. More than 20 shots were fired at his vehicle in an attack linked to the country's escalating drug gang violence. Defense Minister Giancarlo Lafredo called for a strong response, and the military has offered a reward for information on the killers. Ecuador remains in a state of emergency as President Daniel Noboa continues his crackdown on organised crime. Brazilian President Lula da Silva has threatened reciprocal measures in response to US President Donald Trump's recent imposition of 25% tariffs on steel imports. Lula suggested that Brazil might file a complaint with the World Trade Organization or impose taxes on US products. This stance marks a shift from earlier calls by Brazilian officials for dialogue and negotiation. The US maintains a trade surplus with Brazil totaling at $253 million last year on over $80 billion worth in bilateral trade. An Israeli airstrike hit a car in southern Lebanon, killing 2 people and injuring 4 women nearby. The Israeli army claimed it targeted a Hezbollah aerial unit operative. Meanwhile, over 25 people were arrested after an attack on a UN peacekeeper envoy, injuring 2, including a senior commander. Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun condemned the assault, vowing action against those responsible. Watch the latest in this report.
Reports say that an Israeli airstrike targeted a car in the Iqlim al-Tufa district of southern Lebanon on Saturday evening, killing 2 people and injuring 4 others. The strike was carried out by an Israeli drone that fired a guided missile and set the vehicle ablaze, killing both passengers inside. 4 women were injured as they passed through the area at the time of the attack. They were transported to Nabi Berri Governmental Hospital in Nabatea for treatment. Israeli army spokesperson Avichai Adri stated that the airstrike targeted a key operative within Hezbollah's aerial unit in southern Lebanon. Separately, Lebanese authorities arrested more than 25 people following an attack on a UN peacekeeping convoy that left 2 people, including a senior commander, wounded. Lebanese Interior Minister Ahmad al-Hajjar confirmed that army intelligence detained over 25 individuals.
لحد هلا في عنا فوق ال 25 موقوف بمخابرات الجيش اللبناني اللي هي تكلفت من قبل النيابه العامه التمييزيه لاجراء التحقيق. في موقوف عند شعبة المعلومات بقوى الامن الداخلي. طبعا هذا ما بيعني انه هول الموقوفين هن ارتكبوا الاعتداء على اليونيفيل، ولكن التحقيقات بتبين مين هو مسؤول، مين مرتكب.
The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon condemned the attack, calling it a flagrant violation of international law and warning that such acts may amount to war crimes. Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun denounced the assault, asserting that security forces would not tolerate any attempts to destabilize the country. He emphasized that those responsible would be held accountable. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now let's take a look at some news updates from Europe. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski say European countries will not create one unified army in response to threats from Russia. Earlier, Ukrainian President Zelensky called for the creation of a European army, saying the continent needs its army to keep a secure front. After being admitted to hospital on Friday, Pope Francis has finally had a stable night. The Pope was admitted for treatment of what the Vatican initially described as bronchitis. He had been prescribed complete rest while being treated for respiratory infection. Since his admissions on Friday, the entire Vatican has been offering prayers for his steadfast recovery. France is discussing with its allies to hold an informal summit of European leaders to discuss Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron had called for a summit of European leaders in Paris. This decision came after Trump shocked European allies by directly holding a meeting with Russia. It is still unclear whether Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will be invited or not. Tens of thousands of students have descended on the town of Kragujevac in central Serbia. This in the latest in a series of protests in Serbia. These protests have been against last year's train station roof collapse, which claimed over 15 lives. According to the reports, the reason for this collapse was corruption caused shortcomings. The protesters plan to block one of the city's main boulevards for 15 hours and 15 minutes in a tribute to the train station victims. The Czech initiative has delivered 1.6 million artillery shells to Ukraine. Czech President Petr Pavel said the funding has been secure until April and the initiative will continue. The Czech Republic has been raising money from its NATO allies for exactly a year now and then using its connections to openly support Ukraine by providing them with ammunition. A tragic incident has unfolded in the Indian capital of New Delhi. At least 18 people have lost their lives when surging crowds scrambled to catch trains to the world's largest religious gathering, the Kumbh Mela. Here's what we know so far about the tragedy.
At least 18 people died during a stampede at a railway station in India's capital late Saturday. The tragic incident unfolded as and when surging crowds scrambled to catch trains to the world's largest religious gathering, the Kumbh Mela. The Kumbh Mela attracts tens of millions of Hindu faithful every 12 years to the northern city of Prayagraj. As per reports, the ones dead are mostly women and children. Following the incident, the Railways Minister Ashwini Vaishnaw said that a high-level inquiry has been ordered into the causes of the accident. The Prime Minister of India posted on X saying, "My thoughts are with all those who have lost their loved ones. I pray that the injured have a speedy recovery." The opposition parties in India have criticised the travel arrangements in place for the mega festival. The 6-week Kumbh Mela is the single biggest milestone on the Hindu religious calendar, and officials said around 500 million devotees have already visited the festival since it began last month. Reportedly, 30 people were killed in another stampede at the holy confluence of the Ganges, Yamuna and the mythical Saraswati rivers last month. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will now take a look at some news updates from across the Indo-Pacific. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has said that China will play along till the end with the US. Wang stated that the United States is bent on surpassing the country even though Beijing does not wish to conflict with Washington. While speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Wang said China would respond resolutely to unilateral bullying practices. Yet they hope the US could work together with it in the same direction. This is a repercussion of Donald Trump adding 10% tariffs on all Chinese goods. Severe tropical cyclone Zelia powered into Australia's mineral-rich west coast. Gusts of 290 kilometers per hour have led to emergency warnings and ports closing. The slow-moving cyclone was at the highest category of 5 as it landed in the east port of Headland. This port is one of the world's busiest iron ore ports. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told South Korea's foreign minister that the country wants to maintain a stable, trusting relationship with South Korea. Rubio and South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul held a meeting in Germany and agreed to work closely. The goal is for complete denuclearization of North Korea and shared concerns about military cooperation between Russia and North Korea. They have also agreed to cooperate in fields such as energy and advanced technologies, such as shipbuilding, nuclear power, and liquefied natural gas. Authorities have launched a joint investigation for the fire that killed 6 workers at a construction site for a luxury hotel in Busan. According to the Busan Fire and Disaster Headquarters, 27 others suffered injuries. Investigators found the fire started near the pipes in the plumbing terminal room, which is a space used for pipe maintenance and repairs. The police have collected workers' belongings, including phones and helmets, and are now reviewing them as part of the probe. Autopsies for the 6 victims are scheduled for Monday. The Japanese government has said that they will release a fifth of its emergency rice stockpile. There has been hot weather, poor harvests, and a series of typhoons and panic over megaquake warnings, leading to prices doubling up this year. This marked the first time the stockpile was being used for supply chain problems since it was built in 1995. US Vice President JD Vance's remarks at the Munich Security Conference have put Washington at odds with Germany and other European allies. Right away, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz criticized Vance's comments on hate speech and the far right. He defended Europe's approach and rejected any US interference in European democracy. Here is more on the developments.
US Vice President JD Vance sparked controversy at the Munich Security Conference, criticizing European leaders for suppressing free speech and failing to control immigration. His remarks drew sharp rebukes from German officials. Vance told delegates that the greatest threat to Europe was not Russia or China, but what he called a retreat from fundamental values. He accused Germany of silencing political opponents, particularly the far-right AfD party. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz rejected Vance's comments, saying Germany would not be lectured on democracy and that its stance against extremism was necessary to protect democratic institutions.
Deshalb werden wir es nicht akzeptieren, wenn Außenstehende zugunsten dieser Partei in unsere Demokratie, in unsere Wahlen und in die demokratische Meinungsbildung eingreifen. Das gehört sich nicht, erst recht nicht unter Freunden und Verbündeten. Das weisen wir entschieden zurück. Wie es mit unserer Demokratie weitergeht, das entscheiden wir selbst.
Vance further fueled tensions by meeting with Alice Weidel, the leader of the far-right AfD party. The move was widely criticized in Germany as unwelcome US interference just days before national elections. Many delegates at the conference listened to Vance in stunned silence, with little applause. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius later called his remarks unacceptable, saying he was undermining European democracy. Vance's remarks and actions at the Munich conference have widened divisions between the US and its European allies, raising concerns about Washington's stance on far-right politics in Europe. Bureau Report, NewsX.
We will now take a look at some news updates from the world of business. The acquisition of Italy's Ilva steel plant is in its final stages, with Baku Steel Company and Jindal Steel International as the top contenders. Baku Steel, partnering with Azerbaijan Investment Company, has offered around €1 billion, while Jindal Steel has raised its bid to €200 million, with a promise of €2 billion in future investments. The acquisition will help both companies expand in Europe and then strengthen their global presence. Elon Musk announced that xAI will launch its new AI model, Grok 3. Musk claims Grok 3 is the smartest AI in the world, with powerful reasoning abilities and efficient training using synthetic data. He said that the model can refine its own data for logical consistency. This comes amidst the rejection of his bid to buy OpenAI's non-profit arm. Intel's rivals TSMC and Broadcom are considering separate deals that could split the US chip giant in two. Broadcom is exploring a bid for Intel's chip design and marketing business, while TSMC is looking at acquiring its manufacturing plants. The discussions are still informal. Intel, once a leader in semiconductor manufacturing, has been struggling financially. Uber is suing DoorDash, accusing it of pressuring restaurants into inclusive deals. The lawsuit filed in California claims DoorDash threatened higher commission fees and demotion within its app if restaurants partnered with Uber Eats. Uber alleges some businesses abandoned plans to join its platform due to these tactics. DoorDash denies the allegations, calling Uber's claims meritless. Uber is asking the court to intervene and force DoorDash to change its business practices. The European Union is planning to block imports of certain foodstuffs produced under different standards to protect its farmers, following a similar approach to US President Donald Trump's reciprocal trade policy. The European Commission is set to explore tougher import restrictions next week. Early targets could include US crops like soybeans grown with pesticides banned in the EU. Canadian banks and federally regulated financial institutions must now disclose the diversity of their boards and top management under new rules aimed at increasing transparency and representation. Canada's financial watchdog will enforce the rules. The implementation remains uncertain with upcoming leadership changes and elections. And that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more international news updates.